Discipline is not a talent. It is a skill you forge every single day. In this video, How to Force Yourself to Be Disciplined, you will discover actionable strategies that turn laziness into unstoppable momentum, impulses into controlled action, and fleeting motivation into lifelong habits. By the end of this session, you'll understand how to engineer your environment, build non-negotiable routines, and master your impulses to achieve goals you once thought impossible. Subscribe to Audiobook Tone for more practical, life-transforming insights that will guide you step by step toward personal growth, resilience, and success. Number 1. Engineer frictions that block excuses. The morning alarm sounds. The phone is warm under your palm. A habit loop waits like a spring. A single tap and the world slips back into a softer, safer place. Snooze, scroll, self-justification. Every time that tiny motion happens, discipline loses a little ground. Discipline is not a dramatic burst of willpower. It is a landscape engineered to make certain choices easier and other choices harder. Friction is the sculptor of that landscape. When friction is placed intelligently, excuses falter before they even form. This chapter explains how to design friction into your life so excuses become inconvenient rather than persuasive. Start by seeing friction as a neutral tool. It is not punishment. It is an architecture of outcomes. The person who adds friction to bad impulses is not grimacing at life. That person is designing a life that supports the person they want to become. Think like an engineer. Identify the failure points, measure the inputs, then build simple barriers that change the path of least resistance. First action. Identify the 3 recurring excuses that derail you. Be specific, not "I procrastinate," but "I hit snooze when the alarm sounds," or "I open social media during work breaks," or "I reach for chips after dinner." Write them down on a piece of paper and place that paper somewhere visible. Naming an excuse pulls it out of the fog. It converts a vague weakness into an actionable target. Second action. Map the friction already present and missing. For each excuse, ask, what makes this choice easy? If the phone is within arm's reach and the snooze button is one touch away, that's low friction. If the cookie jar sits on the counter, sweet temptation lives at elbow height. If getting to the gym requires unlocking the car, driving across town, and finding parking, that is high friction, too high for most mornings. For each target behavior, decide whether to increase friction for the unwanted action or decrease friction for the desired one. Often both are necessary. Concrete methods to add friction to bad habits. Physical separation. Move the object out of reach or out of the room. Charge the phone on the other side of the house. Put the snacks in a high cabinet that requires a stool. The small effort of getting up interrupts the momentum of an automatic behavior. The physical act of standing and walking creates a pause during which rational intention can reassert itself. Delays and time locks. Add a deliberate pause. Use a digital solution that requires a time delay to access tempting websites. Install website blockers with a password that someone else controls, or set the blocker to impose a 1-hour cooldown after a decision to disable it. When cravings must wait, they often pass. The biology of urges is clear. Intensity peaks and then declines. A forced delay exploits that pattern. Monetary or reputational cost. Put money on the line for failure. Commit to a penalty, donate to a cause you dislike if you break a promise, or pay a friend who will cash the check. Public accountability raises the reputational cost. Telling a small group that you will post daily progress and then actually posting makes failure visible. Humans are social animals. Losing face matters. Use increase required steps. Make the undesired action require more steps than the alternative. For example, uninstall a social media app from the phone and require logging in through a password manager on a desktop. Replace mindless scrolling by making the first step to access social feeds a deliberate login. When the brain must perform a sequence, automatic impulsiveness loses power. Add friction through ritualized checks. A single question before acting can act as friction. Is this choice moving me toward the person I want to be? If answered honestly, this tiny interruption slows the impulse stream. The question can be written on a sticky note near the object, or set as the label of an alarm. Equally important, reduce friction for good behaviors. Discipline is less about restraining yourself all day and more about making the right choice easier than the wrong one. If getting to the gym is a barrier, remove every obstacle between you and the action. Pack the gym bag the night before and place it by the door. Lay out the running shoes beside the bed. Prepare the work environment. Open the document you will write, set a 5-minute timer, and place a glass of water within reach. The fewer decisions required to begin, the more likely the behavior will start. Practical templates to implement immediately. The 2-action rule for mornings. Pick the one action that begins your day. Make water, put on shoes, open the document. Do 2 actions that guarantee a forward motion. Example, wake, drink water, put on workout clothes. The second action is the friction removal for the first. 2. The device migration protocol. For a week, move all non-essential apps off the phone. Replace them with a single folder named Later. Place the folder on the last screen so accessing instant gratification requires 2 swipes and a press. Enough friction to prompt reconsideration. Monitor whether time spent scrolling drops. Adjust. 3. The commitment contract. Choose a measurable habit and write a short contract with clear consequences. Use a simple form. I will action every weekday for number weeks. If I fail, I will penalty. Sign it and give it to a trusted friend or use a service that enforces contracts. The clarity of consequence converts fuzzy intentions into enforceable behavior. 4. The environment swap. Replace the cue that triggers bad behavior with a cue for a better one. If arriving home triggers snacking, create a clean hands, sit, breathe ritual. Enter the house, wash hands, sit on a specific chair for 3 minutes, breathe slowly. The sensory act of washing hands interrupts the automatic reach for food and creates a new association. Sensory details matter. When engineering friction, design the environment so it communicates with the senses. The cool weight of a water bottle on the nightstand invites drinking first. A single light switched on near the workspace changes the room's mood and says work, not leisure. The sound of a specific playlist when exercising cues effort. These small sensory signals create a separate context, and context is the substrate of habits. The Stoic principle that strengthens this approach is simple. Control what is within control and accept what is not. A morning of weak will is not a moral failing to be punished with shame. It is a system failure that can be solved. The Stoic views obstacles as the material of virtue. The block becomes the very thing that forms character. Design obstacles deliberately and they become teachers rather than tyrants. Anticipate failure and design for recovery. Friction is not a silver bullet. Some days the engineered barriers will be bypassed. When that happens, do not narrate a catastrophe. Use a pre-planned recovery routine, a written process that begins with a factual assessment. What happened, followed by a small corrective action. One task completed now, then a reaffirmation of the contract. The recovery should be quick and stoic. Acknowledge, correct, continue. This avoids the I failed, therefore I'm broken narrative. Track the results. Use a simple habit tracker or a calendar where every success gets a filled box. The visual weight of a streak becomes friction against breaking the pattern. The same architecture that makes bad actions harder can make good actions more compelling. Small visual cues, colorful check marks, a physical jar with stones representing completed days, convert abstract progress into tangible evidence. Specific examples that bring these ideas to life. The writer who procrastinates. Remove distractions by using a physical key for the phone. Keep the phone in a locked drawer while writing sessions occur. Replace the startup friction with a prepared template and a 10-minute timer. The first 10 minutes are the activation. Often the session continues past the timer. The person who overeats in the evening. Use smaller plates and move all snack containers to the top shelf, wrapped in opaque bags. Prepare a healthy snack in advance and place it on the counter in a clear bowl. The visible alternative and the extra reach, combined, reduce impulsive eating. The professional who misses deadlines. Create a penalty clause in a peer agreement. If a weekly deliverable is late, the person pays into a shared fund used for group lunches. The immediate social cost changes the calculus of delay. These engineered frictions are not meant to be permanent torture. As habits stabilize, adjust the architecture. Some frictions can be reduced as the desired behavior becomes automatic. The aim is to bootstrap better actions until they require less external force. The environment that once held you accountable can gradually yield as the internalized habit holds. That is the goal, internal strength that emerges from external design. Finally, remember that engineering friction is an act of compassion toward your future self. It recognizes that moment-to-moment, willpower is finite, and that the most compassionate, loving thing you can do is construct a life that protects who you want to become. The person who wakes easily, writes each morning, moves their body, or eats with restraint, is often simply the person who put the right barriers and openings in place. Discipline then feels less like wrestling and more like walking a clear path. The real test is consistency. Install one friction for one major excuse this week. Observe how often the old pattern attempts to assert itself, and notice how many times the new friction succeeds simply by existing. Each small victory rewires expectation. Over months, these engineered frictions compound into an architecture of a disciplined life. The alarms will still ring, the urges will still whisper, but excuses will find the path inconvenient, and inconvenience is the ally of discipline. Number 2, build rituals that trigger action. Every great accomplishment begins with a single repeated action. It's not random inspiration that drives success, but the steady, almost ritualistic repetition of behaviors that prepare the mind and body to perform at their peak. Rituals are more than routines. They are triggers for action, small signals that prime focus, intention, and energy. The person who consistently achieves their goals is not relying on fleeting motivation. They have built a system where the first action flows naturally from the ritual, almost automatically. Crafting such rituals is the key to turning desire into discipline, intention into execution, and potential into reality. The first step is understanding the power of a trigger. A trigger is a signal embedded in your environment, your mind or your body that prompts a specific behavior. It could be as simple as a specific song that signals it's time to write, or the act of putting on running shoes that primes the body for movement. Triggers bypass deliberation and make action feel almost inevitable. They create momentum by using the brain's preference for patterns, turning decision-making into a mechanical response that works in your favor rather than against you. Start by examining your current habits. Identify moments where actions either stall or flow effortlessly. Which tasks do you consistently avoid, and which happen without resistance? Awareness of these patterns allows you to design rituals that harness natural tendencies. For example, if writing in the morning is difficult, build a small ritual that cues the start. Make tea, light a candle, open a notebook, and sit. The combination of sensory cues and sequence prepares both mind and body for work. Over time, the brain begins to associate this exact sequence with focus and creativity. Next, scale the ritual to suit the desired behavior. The ritual must be easy enough to start, but significant enough to carry weight. If the goal is exercise, the ritual might begin with putting on workout clothes and filling a water bottle. The physical act of dressing cues readiness. If the goal is mental performance, the ritual could include a brief meditation, a notebook for goal setting, and the removal of distractions. Each component primes attention and reduces friction between intention and action. The key is that every step in the ritual has a purpose. It signals, prepares, or motivates, leaving no room for hesitation. Consistency is more powerful than intensity. Rituals rely on repetition to train both brain and body. The first few attempts may feel mechanical or forced. The mind may resist or wander, but the repetition builds an automatic response. This is the foundation of what the Stoics called virtue in practice. Repeated right action becomes character. Small repeated steps compound into habit and eventually into mastery. The ritual doesn't have to be long or dramatic. Even 5 minutes of focused action can prime the entire day for discipline and achievement. Sensory cues amplify the effect. Our brains respond strongly to consistent sensory signals, so include visual, auditory, or tactile elements that reinforce the ritual. A specific song, the smell of coffee, a particular pen, or a clean desk can become a reliable prompt for focus. These sensory anchors create an almost Pavlovian response. The body and mind recognize the cue, anticipate action, and prepare to perform. Over time, the ritual becomes a seamless signal response loop that requires minimal willpower. Preparation is essential. Rituals work best when the environment is intentionally designed, remove distractions, and ensure that all necessary tools are ready and accessible. For writing, this might mean a charged laptop, notebooks, and pens in a dedicated space. For exercise, shoes, clothing, and water ready the night before. The preparation itself becomes part of the ritual, reducing the number of decisions needed to begin. This deliberate readiness eliminates excuses and keeps the energy focused on action rather than setup. Anchor rituals to existing patterns to create momentum. Humans are creatures of habit. The brain craves familiarity. If a ritual is linked to an existing habit, it gains strength from the association. For example, if you already brush your teeth every morning, place a notebook beside the sink and write one line after brushing. This piggybacks the new behavior onto an established pattern, making the adoption smoother and more likely to persist. Layering rituals in this way builds chains of action that reinforce discipline throughout the day. Flexibility within structure is important. While rituals should be consistent enough to become triggers, they must also accommodate real-life disruptions. The Stoic approach emphasizes preparation and adaptation. The ritual is the ideal, but setbacks are expected. When traveling, use portable elements of the ritual. If the environment changes, retain core actions. Flexibility ensures the ritual remains sustainable and avoids the trap of perfectionism, which can lead to inconsistency and guilt. Measure and refine the ritual continuously. Track what works and what doesn't, which cues consistently lead to action, and which steps feel redundant or burdensome. Adjust as needed. Effective rituals evolve with your goals, energy levels, and environment. The goal is not a rigid process, but a living system that facilitates consistent action. Reflection and adjustment enhance both efficiency and effectiveness, turning the ritual into a personal lever for sustained growth. The emotional dimension of rituals cannot be ignored. They are not merely mechanical. They influence mood and mindset. A ritual performed with intention signals to the brain that the upcoming task matters. It creates a sense of control and readiness, reducing anxiety and resistance. Rituals can transform daunting tasks into predictable, manageable sequences. Over time, they become comforting anchors in a chaotic world, providing stability and clarity when distractions and demands threaten focus. Rituals also create accountability to oneself. When a sequence becomes internalized, failing to perform it disrupts the expected flow. The discomfort of breaking the ritual serves as a natural corrective mechanism, reminding you of your commitments. This internal feedback loop builds resilience and strengthens self-mastery. External validation is not required. The ritual itself enforces consistency, creating self-sufficiency and reinforcing discipline through structure and repetition. The transformative power of rituals is evident in real-world examples. Writers, athletes, and leaders consistently rely on them. The morning ritual of a writer, notebook, quiet space, translates intention into creativity. The pre-game routine of an athlete, stretching, visualization, and focused breathing, translates preparation into performance. CEOs often have morning rituals that include reading, journaling, or exercise to prime focus and decision-making. Across domains, success is rarely the result of spontaneity. It emerges from repeated intentional action, triggered by well-designed rituals. Begin small. Choose one area of life where action is repeatedly delayed or avoided. Design a 5-minute ritual that triggers the desired behavior. Start with one cue, one action, and one sensory anchor. Observe how the brain responds. Adjust based on feedback. Once this small ritual succeeds, expand it. Layer additional steps. Attach it to other existing habits, or introduce more sensory cues. Growth compounds as rituals accumulate, and small wins reinforce identity as a disciplined, capable person. Ultimately, rituals bridge the gap between desire and execution. Motivation fluctuates, willpower wanes, and circumstances shift, but a carefully constructed ritual provides a consistent pathway to action. They create a predictable environment where the brain moves effortlessly from intention to behavior. They transform discipline from a fleeting virtue into a reliable skill. Each ritual, repeated with consistency and intention, becomes a signal to both mind and body. Action is not optional, it is inevitable. The purpose of a ritual extends beyond immediate productivity. It shapes identity. By performing the ritual consistently, you become the type of person who follows through. The act itself communicates who you are to your subconscious, someone committed, prepared, and disciplined. Identity is reinforced not by grand declarations, but by repeated, tangible actions that signal consistency to yourself. Over time, these rituals solidify a disciplined self-image that is resistant to excuses, doubt, and procrastination. Start now. Pick a single meaningful action that you have delayed for too long. Identify a trigger, design a sequence, prepare the environment, and attach sensory cues. Execute the ritual daily, reflect on its effectiveness, and refine as needed. Witness the transformation as repeated actions become effortless, motivation becomes embedded, and discipline emerges naturally. Rituals are the bridges from thought to reality, from intention to action, from who you are now to who you aspire to be. When rituals are built thoughtfully, they do more than create action. They create momentum, resilience, and a life aligned with purpose. By linking action to triggers, the brain anticipates effort, focus sharpens, and the body prepares. Over time, this alignment between mind, body, and environment transforms the ordinary into the extraordinary. Discipline becomes a natural byproduct, not a struggle. Through ritual, action becomes inevitable, consistency becomes identity, and small repeated steps yield monumental results. Rituals are not optional for those who seek mastery. They are essential. They take the chaos of daily life and transform it into a structured sequence that supports growth. The first step requires intention, the second requires repetition, and the third yields transformation. Each time a ritual triggers action, a tiny victory compounds, strengthening the foundation for long-term success. In this way, rituals are not mere habits. They are the architecture of disciplined living, the engine that turns desire into measurable progress, and the compass that points toward a life of purpose and achievement. Number 3. Design identity that rejects laziness. Every decision you make shapes who you are, often more than you realize. Laziness is not simply a momentary choice. It is a reflection of identity that has been allowed to solidify over time. To reject laziness, the approach cannot rely solely on willpower or fleeting motivation. It must begin with designing an identity so aligned with discipline, purpose, and action that laziness feels foreign, uncomfortable, and unnecessary. Identity is the lens through which choices are filtered, the foundation of consistent behavior. Changing habits alone is temporary. Reshaping identity creates lasting transformation. Identity begins with clarity. Define the person you want to become with precision. Avoid vague statements like "I want to be productive" or "I want to be disciplined." These are aspirational but do not compel action. Instead, articulate identity in concrete terms. I am someone who completes critical tasks before noon every day. Or I am a person who exercises for 30 minutes daily without exception. The more specific the identity, the more your brain has a clear reference point. Decisions then become either aligned with that identity or in conflict with it, simplifying choice and reducing hesitation. Once identity is clearly defined, reinforce it with daily evidence. Every action you take that aligns with the chosen identity acts like a brick in the foundation of self-perception. If the identity is a person who writes daily, then writing even a single paragraph in the morning reinforces that truth. Avoid thinking that a single failure defines you. Identity is cumulative. Each aligned choice adds weight. Each misaligned choice is feedback to correct course. Consistency is the force that transforms self-concept from theory into reality. Language shapes identity more than many realize. The words you use to describe yourself influence behavior. Saying "I am lazy" or "I can't do this" embeds the concept of limitation into thought patterns, making action feel unnatural. Replace these statements with identity-affirming declarations. I am someone who finishes what I start, or I take pride in showing up even when I feel resistance. Repetition of such phrases, especially combined with physical action, reinforces neural pathways associated with discipline and effort. Over time, these declarations move from conscious repetition into instinctive belief. Environment is a silent partner in identity design. If the surroundings encourage distraction, indulgence, or inactivity, even the strongest intentions falter. A person who wishes to embody energy and diligence must surround themselves with cues and structures that support that identity. Desks clear of unnecessary clutter, screens limited to productive applications, and visual reminders of goals reinforce the notion that action is the default. The environment becomes a physical manifestation of the identity you are building, guiding subconscious behavior toward alignment. Actions must consistently reflect the identity. This is where laziness is confronted most directly. It is not enough to want to be productive. The identity must be demonstrated through measurable behavior. If laziness tempts, respond immediately with a deliberate act that confirms the desired self-concept. Choose the harder path when both options exist. Discipline is cultivated by choosing effort, not by hoping motivation arrives. Over time, this creates a feedback loop. The identity demands action, and action reinforces identity. Rituals serve as identity anchors. Establish sequences of behavior that signal and reinforce who you are. For instance, someone who identifies as organized might have a morning routine that includes planning the day, reviewing priorities, and tidying their workspace. These repeated actions communicate the identity to the subconscious mind. The more sensory cues, the stronger the signal. The feel of a clean desk, the sound of a pen scratching on paper, the visual order of neatly stacked items, all become embodied affirmations of the desired self. Self-imposed accountability is a critical tool. Laziness thrives in the absence of immediate consequences. Align identity with visible, enforceable standards. Track daily behaviors, publicly commit to goals, or pair accountability with a peer who shares the commitment. Accountability externalizes the expectations of the identity, making deviations uncomfortable and motivating adherence. When identity becomes observable through consistent action, laziness loses legitimacy because it contradicts visible evidence. Understanding the psychology of resistance is essential. Laziness is often a response to discomfort, boredom, or fear. The identity that rejects laziness does not eliminate these feelings, but reframes them. Resistance becomes a signal that the opportunity to act exists, not a justification for avoidance. When discomfort arises, the identity compels action despite the impulse to retreat. This perspective transforms internal friction into a catalyst for growth, rather than a reason for stagnation. Small wins compound rapidly in identity formation. Each deliberate act that reinforces the self-concept creates momentum. Even seemingly minor actions, making a bed, responding promptly to messages, or completing a small task, serve as proof of the chosen identity. These micro-victories shape perception and strengthen the sense of capability. Laziness cannot survive in a pattern of repeated accomplishment. Success becomes habitual, not sporadic, because the identity itself demands continuity. Visualization strengthens identity by connecting present action to desired self-concept. Imagine the person you want to be in vivid detail, how they respond to challenges, the routines they follow, the energy they carry. Experience it mentally before performing it physically. This prepares the mind and body to act in alignment with the envisioned identity, reducing hesitation and creating a natural pathway toward behavior. Visualization is more than wishful thinking. It primes neural networks for real action. Reflection consolidates identity daily. At the end of each day, review decisions and behaviors. Ask, did my actions reflect who I aspire to be? Identify moments of alignment and deviation. Celebrate the evidence of identity in action, and adjust misaligned behaviors without judgment. This practice reinforces accountability to oneself and transforms abstract goals into measurable patterns of life. The daily habit of reflection anchors identity in reality. Identity evolves through deliberate challenge. Laziness often persists because the mind seeks comfort over growth. Embrace difficulty as an opportunity to affirm identity. When presented with tasks that are uncomfortable, time-consuming, or physically demanding, respond as the person you aspire to be. Each act of deliberate effort strengthens the self-concept. Over time, challenges that once seemed daunting become familiar opportunities to demonstrate identity in practice. Discipline becomes a natural extension of identity rather than a struggle. The person who designs identity to reject laziness experiences effort as meaningful, not burdensome. Choices that align with this identity feel like an obligation, a reflection of character, and a source of pride. Laziness becomes incompatible with the self-perception that has been intentionally constructed. The mind, body, and environment work together to support consistent, productive behavior. External symbols can reinforce identity. Items such as a journal, a watch, a workspace, or a piece of clothing can serve as tangible affirmations of who you are. These symbols cue behavior and remind you of the principles you have chosen to embody. The visual and tactile presence of these items maintains awareness and strengthens the bridge between intention and action. Repetition solidifies the shift from conscious effort to automatic alignment. The first attempts may feel deliberate and sometimes awkward, but each repeated choice reinforces the neural architecture associated with the desired identity. Laziness is gradually displaced because it no longer fits the internal narrative. What once required external motivation eventually becomes self-sustaining because the identity itself compels action. Ultimately, designing an identity that rejects laziness is about ownership. It is the conscious act of defining who you are, committing to daily behaviors that confirm that self-concept, and structuring life to make alignment inevitable. Laziness becomes irrelevant, not through punishment or coercion, but because the person you have chosen to be consistently acts otherwise. Strength, focus, and discipline emerge as natural consequences of intentional identity construction. Begin immediately by defining the identity you wish to embody. Select one domain, work, fitness, creativity, or personal growth, and articulate a specific, actionable self-concept. Align behaviors, environment, and language with this identity. Track progress, reflect daily, and celebrate evidence of alignment. With persistence, the identity will internalize, and laziness will no longer find a foothold. You will act consistently, naturally, and decisively because the very framework of your mind, body, and surroundings demands it. The transformation is not instantaneous, but with repeated, deliberate action, the person you are becomes the person you intend to be. Laziness is not defeated by punishment or guilt. It is outgrown through the architecture of identity. By designing who you are with clarity, purpose, and repeated reinforcement, the life you desire becomes a natural extension of the self, and discipline becomes the effortless expression of identity. Number 4. Gamify discomfort to build consistency. Discomfort is an inevitable companion on the path to growth. Every meaningful achievement carries a cost: physical strain, mental fatigue, or emotional unease. Most people avoid discomfort instinctively, choosing ease over progress. Yet those who embrace it systematically are the ones who transform potential into excellence. Gamifying discomfort reframes resistance as opportunity. By treating challenges as levels to conquer, metrics to track, or games to win, the mind shifts from avoidance to engagement. What was once something to dread becomes a mechanism for growth, consistency, and mastery. This approach leverages the natural human drive for achievement and recognition, transforming struggle into motivation. The first step is awareness, noticing where discomfort appears in your routines. It could be the morning workout, the cold shower, the disciplined study session, or the difficult conversation you've been avoiding. These are points where the body or mind resists, where habit breaks down, or excuses emerge. Document them carefully. By identifying precise moments of resistance, you can design the gamification strategy around them. Discomfort cannot be avoided entirely, but its impact can be managed, measured, and harnessed for advantage. Gamification requires clear rules and measurable progress. Define what constitutes success for the activity that challenges you. For instance, completing a 20-minute run without interruption writing 500 words on a tough topic, or holding a difficult conversation to resolution. Assign points, levels, or milestones to each achievement. The key is to make effort visible and progress trackable. This externalization of accomplishment taps into reward pathways in the brain, creating positive reinforcement that encourages repetition, even when motivation is low. Incorporate progressive difficulty. Just like a game, challenges should scale as skill and resilience increase. Start with a manageable level that stretches your abilities without overwhelming them. Once mastered, raise the stakes. Longer runs, heavier weights, more complex tasks, or more extended periods of focus. The incremental increase keeps the brain engaged, prevents boredom, and ensures continual adaptation. Discomfort is then no longer random or paralyzing. It becomes a predictable element to navigate strategically. Accountability amplifies the effects of gamifying discomfort. In games, performance is tracked and often compared to others or to a prior personal best. Translate this principle to your routines. Keep a log of successes, time spent, or challenges completed. Share progress with a trusted peer or group if appropriate. Visibility increases commitment, and the desire to maintain streaks or surpass previous records strengthens adherence. Human nature responds strongly to visible progress. Streaks, levels, and metrics tap into the same instincts that make games compelling. Reward is crucial but strategic. Celebrate small victories, but avoid undermining long-term goals with excessive indulgence. Rewards should enhance the sense of accomplishment rather than negate it. For example, a hot shower after an early morning run is satisfying without derailing discipline. A brief reflection on progress, a journal entry marking completion, or a small visual token can serve as acknowledgement. Gamification leverages reward anticipation to reinforce behavior while keeping effort aligned with long-term objectives. Visualization strengthens the gamification effect. Before engaging with discomfort, imagine it as a game scenario. Identify the obstacle, the strategy, and the potential rewards for overcoming it. The mind prepares for action, reducing resistance and enhancing focus. Visualization also allows rehearsal of coping mechanisms, mentally strengthening endurance before physical or emotional engagement. Treating discomfort as a challenge to be navigated rather than avoided transforms the experience and primes consistent effort. Use scoring systems creatively. Assign points not only for completing tasks, but also for managing difficult emotions or persisting in moments of fatigue. For instance, resisting procrastination earns a score, pushing through mental fatigue adds another, and responding thoughtfully under stress adds more. This multidimensional scoring encourages holistic growth, rewarding not just action but resilience, focus, and emotional control. The system creates a sense of mastery over both internal and external challenges. Introduce penalties judiciously. Games often impose consequences for failure or inaction. In life, these can take the form of minor inconveniences or self-imposed accountability measures, such as donating to a cause you do not support if a goal is missed, or taking on an extra task the following day. The discomfort of the penalty reinforces discipline without creating fear or guilt. The brain begins to associate avoidance with tangible consequences, strengthening commitment to progress. Consistency emerges naturally when discomfort is gamified. The human brain responds strongly to systems that provide feedback, measurable progress, and a sense of achievement. By transforming effort into a structured challenge, engagement increases, and the tendency to quit diminishes. Even on days when motivation is low, the framework of levels, points, and progress creates momentum, reducing reliance on willpower alone. The game itself drives action. Layering challenges increases engagement. Combine multiple forms of discomfort into one cohesive game. For example, a morning routine could include a physical challenge, a mental task, and a reflective journaling exercise. Assign points for each, with bonuses for completing all elements consecutively. This multidimensional approach maintains novelty, prevents monotony, and cultivates endurance in various domains simultaneously. Discomfort becomes a playground for growth, rather than a source of dread. Account for failure strategically. Games are forgiving. Losing a level is a temporary setback, Apply this mindset to life. Failure is data, not a verdict. When a streak breaks or a goal is missed, analyze the factors, adjust the system, and continue. The gamified mindset reduces fear of imperfection, allowing experimentation and growth. The brain learns resilience by repeatedly confronting challenges in a safe, structured context, strengthening both persistence and adaptability. Ritualization strengthens gamification. Embed these challenges in daily routines so that they become automatic. For example, the same sequence of stretching, reading, and focused work can occur at the same time every day, with points tracked consistently. Over time, the ritual signals readiness, minimizing resistance and making engagement with discomfort predictable. The combination of habit and gamification creates an environment where consistent effort is effortless. Sensory and emotional cues enhance performance. Music, lighting, or visual markers can create context-specific triggers for action. The brain begins to associate these cues with effort and reward. The smell of coffee signaling the start of work, a particular playlist energizing exercise, or a sticky note marking points in progress can all reinforce commitment. Discomfort becomes meaningful, structured, and motivating rather than overwhelming. Social dynamics amplify gamification. Compete against past performance or against peers with similar goals. Share scores, streaks, or milestones publicly or privately, depending on comfort. Healthy competition engages the natural drive for achievement, accountability, and recognition. Observing progress in others also provides insight into strategies and reinforces the possibility of success. Social feedback loops make adherence to discomfort challenges more engaging and less isolating. Over time, gamifying discomfort changes perception. Tasks that once induced dread are reframed as challenges to conquer. Consistency is no longer a chore, but an enjoyable engagement with a system of progress. The mind begins to seek these moments as opportunities rather than obstacles. The body and emotions adapt, and resilience becomes a default response. The individual learns to embrace struggle as a necessary, even rewarding element of personal growth. Start small. Select a single uncomfortable task and assign a point system. Clear milestones and a minor reward. Track completion daily. Adjust difficulty incrementally as capability grows. Introduce additional challenges gradually. Layer complexity, and begin creating a personal system of gamified growth. Consistency and engagement will rise as the brain begins to expect, respond to, and enjoy the challenge structure. The essence of gamifying discomfort is turning unavoidable struggle into a structured, measurable, and motivating system. By leveraging progress tracking, rewards, penalties, and scaled challenges, discomfort becomes a tool for growth rather than an obstacle. The consistent application of these principles cultivates resilience, reinforces discipline, and produces measurable improvement in all areas of life. Challenges are no longer barriers, they are levels to conquer, points to earn, and evidence of capability. In the long term, this approach builds not only skill but identity. The person who regularly confronts discomfort, measures progress, and pursues mastery becomes naturally consistent, resilient, and proactive. Laziness and avoidance lose relevance. Life becomes a series of actionable challenges where progress, effort, and growth are both visible and rewarding. The brain learns to crave engagement over avoidance, and discipline emerges as a byproduct of structured, gamified experience. Discomfort is no longer something to endure but something to play with. The game is designed, rules are clear, progress is visible, and rewards are meaningful. By transforming struggle into a system of achievement, consistency is built, resilience is strengthened, and personal growth becomes inevitable. Each challenge faced, each point earned, and each level conquered reinforces identity, action, and momentum. Mastery is not a distant goal. It is the natural outcome of engaging with discomfort as a game, every single day. Number 5, schedule pressure moments for momentum. Momentum is the secret engine behind consistent achievement. Action begets action, and once a task is set into motion, subsequent efforts often feel easier, faster, and more natural. However, initiating momentum is often the hardest part. The mind resists beginning, procrastination thrives, and hesitation creeps in. One of the most effective ways to overcome this inertia is to deliberately schedule moments of pressure. These are concentrated periods where stakes are heightened, urgency is imposed, and distraction is minimized. By creating intentional pressure, the mind is compelled to act, focus sharpens, and forward motion becomes almost automatic. Momentum, once initiated, carries forward and compounds in ways that isolated effort rarely achieves. The first step is understanding the natural human response to deadlines and pressure. Our brains are wired to respond to immediate consequences. When a task is urgent, attention narrows, focus intensifies, and productivity spikes. Yet in everyday life, most tasks lack inherent urgency, leaving the brain free to wander, delay, or avoid. By artificially introducing pressure, whether through strict time limits, external accountability, or staged challenges, you force your system to operate in high-efficiency mode. These pressure moments act as accelerators, propelling you past inertia into sustained action. Start by identifying key tasks where momentum could make the greatest difference. These are projects that often stall, creative work that is frequently postponed, or decisions that linger without resolution. Determine which of these will benefit from a concentrated period of focus. Once selected, create a specific window of time dedicated to the task. Treat it as non-negotiable. The fixed boundary itself generates psychological pressure, a clear signal to the brain that postponement is not an option. Time constraints are powerful tools. A compressed schedule forces prioritization, decision-making, and rapid execution. For example, giving yourself 2 hours to complete a report, rather than leaving it open-ended, produces focus and reduces the space for distraction. The pressure creates a sense of urgency, enhancing cognitive engagement. The initial effort required to start becomes smaller when the task is framed within a clear temporal boundary, allowing momentum to emerge quickly. External accountability enhances effectiveness. Inform a colleague, friend, or mentor that the task must be completed within the scheduled window. The knowledge that someone else is aware of your commitment increases focus and reduces the likelihood of deferral. Accountability acts as a multiplier of pressure, converting internal deadlines into external obligations that carry real psychological weight. Humans naturally respond to social expectation, and leveraging this instinct strengthens the drive to act. Pairing pressure with sensory or environmental cues amplifies the effect. For instance, changing location, minimizing distractions, or setting specific ambient conditions primes attention. A quiet room, clean workspace, or a particular playlist can signal that the pressure period has begun. The brain associates these cues with focused activity, creating a Pavlovian response that encourages action. Over time, the environment itself becomes a trigger for momentum, reducing reliance on fluctuating willpower. Break large tasks into concentrated segments. Extended periods of work without clear boundaries can dilute pressure and reduce intensity. Use short, intense bursts of activity, each with a defined outcome or milestone. This micro-pressure technique mimics natural high-stakes situations and trains the mind to operate efficiently under constraint. Each completed segment reinforces progress, builds confidence, and creates a compounding sense of momentum that propels the next segment forward. Incorporate tangible consequences for incomplete work. Pressure moments gain potency when failure carries a cost. These consequences do not need to be extreme. They can be as simple as rescheduling a favorite activity, adjusting future plans, or taking on an additional small task. The presence of consequence sharpens focus, heightens commitment, and reinforces the seriousness of the window. Human cognition responds more readily to immediate concrete results than abstract intentions, making structured consequence a natural amplifier of momentum. Positive reinforcement further strengthens the cycle. Celebrate completion immediately, acknowledging both the achievement and the process. The reward can be brief, a reflection, a note in a journal, or a small tangible treat. Recognizing accomplishment reinforces the association between pressure, action, and reward, creating a habit loop that encourages repeated engagement. Momentum is more easily sustained when effort is both recognized and psychologically satisfying. Visualization and mental rehearsal increase the effectiveness of scheduled pressure moments. Before entering the period, mentally simulate the tasks, potential challenges, and required decisions. Anticipate difficulties and pre-plan solutions. This primes the cognitive system to respond efficiently when real pressure arrives, reducing hesitation and enhancing flow. Visualization transforms uncertainty into structured expectation, allowing focus to remain on execution rather than decision-making under stress. Stack pressure moments for cascading momentum. Sequence multiple high-focus periods throughout the day interspersed with brief recovery intervals. The initial period generates movement that carries naturally into subsequent segments. Success in the first window reduces resistance in the next, creating a chain reaction of productivity. This approach mirrors the structure of athletic training or performance arts, where controlled, repeated stress fosters both competence and endurance. Monitor and adjust the intensity of pressure. Too little, and the period fails to break inertia. Too much, and it becomes overwhelming or counterproductive. Observe energy levels, mental engagement, and task completion. Modify the length, frequency, or stakes of pressure windows accordingly. The goal is optimal tension, enough to compel action, but sustainable enough to maintain consistency over time. Combine pressure with preparation to maximize output. Planning in advance ensures that the window is used efficiently. Gather all necessary materials, outline steps, and clarify goals before the period begins. The act of preparation itself reduces cognitive friction and allows the pressure moment to function as a pure accelerator of action rather than a scramble to organize. Momentum thrives when the stage is set deliberately. The psychological benefits of scheduled pressure extend beyond immediate productivity. Regular exposure trains resilience, focus, and decision-making under constraint. The mind becomes accustomed to operating in high-stakes situations, reducing avoidance and increasing confidence. Over time, this capability generalizes, allowing peak performance even in unplanned or naturally stressful circumstances. Pressure becomes a familiar tool rather than a source of anxiety. Integration with daily routines reinforces effectiveness. Identify natural energy peaks, habitual times of focus, or recurring tasks, and schedule pressure moments around them. Aligning with biological rhythms and existing structures amplifies efficiency and reduces resistance. The consistency of repeated pressure windows transforms episodic bursts of productivity into a systemic approach to sustained achievement. Track and visualize results. Document completed pressure periods, noting outcomes, challenges overcome, and progress made. This creates a tangible record of accomplishment that motivates continued effort. Visualization of success reinforces identity as someone capable of consistent execution under pressure, strengthening both confidence and future performance. Start small with one critical task. Choose a task that tends to stagnate. Set a fixed, non-negotiable period for completion. Remove distractions, and observe how focus and momentum naturally develop. After mastery of one window, expand to additional tasks or longer periods. Incremental exposure builds both skill and psychological resilience. Ultimately, scheduling pressure moments transforms the way action occurs. Momentum is no longer dependent on sporadic motivation or fluctuating willpower. By introducing artificial urgency, clear boundaries, accountability, preparation, and reflection, action becomes natural, progress accelerates, and inertia diminishes. Pressure ceases to be a threat and becomes a catalyst, a deliberate, structured mechanism for creating forward motion. Momentum, once initiated, compounds. One focused effort leads to another, and each success builds confidence, efficiency, and capability. The consistent application of scheduled pressure develops a life rhythm in which action flows naturally, challenges are confronted directly, and productivity becomes habitual. Discipline is reinforced not by arbitrary force, but by carefully structured periods of urgency that harness human psychology for growth. Scheduled pressure is more than a productivity hack. It is a principle for high-functioning living. It leverages human responsiveness to urgency, structures time and attention, and converts potential energy into kinetic achievement. Over weeks and months, this approach creates a reliable rhythm of accomplishment, trains the mind to thrive under challenge, and makes consistent forward movement the default state. In this system, momentum becomes self-sustaining, and every intentionally pressured moment reinforces the identity of someone capable, disciplined, and unstoppable. Number 6. Shrink resistance using micro-commitments. Every great achievement begins with a step that feels almost imperceptible. Resistance is the force that keeps most people from starting. It whispers reasons to delay, amplifies uncertainty, and magnifies the gap between intention and action. One of the most effective ways to overcome this inertia is through micro-commitments, intentionally small, manageable actions that are so easy to perform that resistance has no foothold. These tiny choices are deceptively powerful because they bypass hesitation, generate momentum, and gradually reshape behavior without relying on heroic effort or fluctuating motivation. The principle behind micro-commitments is simple. The brain struggles to refuse tiny, concrete actions. Writing a single sentence, doing one push-up, or opening a notebook is not threatening. The initial step is achievable, reducing the mental friction that often stops progress. Once the micro-action is complete, the next step becomes easier. The first motion activates momentum. The small victory creates psychological reinforcement. Repeated over days and weeks, these seemingly minor efforts compound into consistent patterns of productivity, self-discipline, and resilience. Start by identifying the areas where resistance is strongest. These are the tasks most often postponed, avoided, or deferred. Be specific. Instead of targeting exercise, focus on do one push-up or put on running shoes. Instead of targeting writing, focus on write one sentence or open a blank document. The goal is to shrink the task to a scale where action feels inevitable. Micro-commitments are deliberately designed to lower the entry barrier, removing excuses before they arrive. Design each micro-commitment to feel almost absurdly achievable. Success must be guaranteed. For instance, if your goal is daily exercise, start with a 1-minute stretch. If your goal is learning a language, start with a single vocabulary word. By achieving small wins consistently, the brain begins to associate effort with immediate reward, reducing anxiety about the larger task. Momentum emerges naturally because completion of the micro-action signals capability and competence. Link micro-commitments to triggers in your environment. Place cues that automatically prompt action. A notebook on your desk reminds you to write a sentence. Workout shoes by the bed signal movement. Phone alarms or calendar reminders can act as triggers. The key is that the micro-commitment is tied to a concrete context that minimizes reliance on fluctuating internal motivation. Environmental prompts create consistency by embedding action into daily life. Build a chain of micro-commitments to achieve more complex outcomes. Begin with the smallest step, and once it is complete, allow it to naturally lead to the next. For example, putting on running shoes might lead to stepping outside, which then leads to a 5-minute jog. Each completed micro-action increases commitment to the subsequent step. The initial effort is so small that the brain cannot rationalize avoidance, yet each successive action produces meaningful results. External accountability amplifies adherence. Share micro-commitments with a trusted friend, mentor, or peer. Even tiny actions take on weight when someone else is aware of the promise. Social pressure, when applied positively, reinforces completion, providing additional motivation beyond internal willpower. Humans are inherently social beings, and accountability leverages the desire to maintain consistency between stated intentions and visible behavior. Reward is another critical element. Even a small acknowledgement of completing a micro-commitment strengthens reinforcement. Checking off a task, recording progress in a journal, or allowing a minor personal indulgence creates a positive feedback loop. The brain begins to link effort with reward, making initiation easier each subsequent day. Micro-commitments succeed because completion is frequent, immediate, and satisfying. Cumulative effect transforms perception. One push-up, one sentence, 1 minute of focused work may seem insignificant individually, but over time they reshape behavior, identity, and capability. Micro-commitments lower the barrier so consistently that action becomes habitual. The aggregation of small choices builds momentum, reinforces self-efficacy, and diminishes internal resistance. What once felt daunting becomes approachable, and what was previously delayed becomes routine. Micro-commitments are not limited to skill building. They can also address emotional resilience. Facing a small fear, sending a difficult email, or making a brief but uncomfortable phone call functions similarly. Start with the least intimidating version, execute it, and then gradually escalate. Each successful micro-engagement reduces avoidance patterns and strengthens the habit of confronting discomfort rather than evading it. Timing is essential. Schedule micro-commitments during predictable windows when mental energy is available. Consistency reinforces habit formation and strengthens the neural pathways associated with the desired behavior. The brain learns to expect these small actions, lowering the mental friction required to initiate them over time. Regular timing transforms sporadic action into automatic response. Track progress visually to reinforce momentum. Mark each completed micro-commitment on a calendar, habit tracker, or simple checklist. The visual representation of repeated action provides motivation and tangible evidence of progress. Patterns emerge, encouraging persistence, even when tasks feel repetitive or mundane. The brain responds strongly to visual confirmation of achievement, and micro-commitments ensure that this reinforcement occurs multiple times daily. Pair micro-commitments with incremental difficulty. Once an initial action becomes effortless, expand the scope slightly. Add one push-up to the first one, 2 sentences instead of one, or an additional minute to a focused work session. The gradual scaling allows consistent growth without triggering resistance or overwhelm. This principle mirrors the concept of progressive overload. Small, deliberate increases produce sustainable improvement. Micro-commitments also help overcome perfectionism. Often, the paralysis of inaction stems from the belief that the first attempt must be perfect. By committing to the smallest possible action, perfection is irrelevant. The emphasis shifts from flawless execution to consistent initiation. Over time, quality improves naturally, but the critical breakthrough is simply starting. Action replaces hesitation as the default response. Combine micro-commitments with strategic reflection. At the end of each day, review completed actions. Assess patterns of resistance, success, and momentum. Identify which micro-commitments reliably trigger larger behavior and which require adjustment. Reflection strengthens learning, increases self-awareness, and allows refinement of the system to maximize adherence and effectiveness. Use micro-commitments to bridge the gap between intention and identity. Repeated small actions reinforce self-perception as someone who acts rather than procrastinates. Each successful execution communicates competence, reliability, and discipline to the subconscious mind. Identity formation does not require monumental effort. It requires repeated evidence of consistency, which micro-commitments provide effortlessly. Micro-commitments are particularly powerful when integrated with larger systems. For instance, a 1-minute action can serve as the opening move in a broader project. Writing a single sentence becomes the doorway to a full chapter. A 1-minute stretch triggers a 30-minute workout. By embedding small steps within larger frameworks, resistance is neutralized and progress is assured. The mind adapts to action as a natural state, and effort scales organically. The beauty of micro-commitments is that they convert daunting tasks into psychologically manageable pieces. Resistance is neutralized before it can assert itself. Momentum builds, confidence strengthens, and habit forms with minimal struggle. Each small step functions as a keystone, supporting the next, creating an upward spiral of action that is self-sustaining. What was once intimidating becomes approachable, habitual, and even enjoyable. Start immediately by choosing one task that has been avoided. Shrink it to the smallest actionable step. Execute it now. Notice how the act of doing even a minuscule portion creates forward movement. Repeat daily, gradually expanding the scope as consistency builds. Over weeks, these micro-commitments accumulate into major progress, transforming both behavior and self-perception. The ultimate advantage of micro-commitments is that they shift the locus of control from fluctuating willpower to deliberate design. Resistance is neutralized because the first step is too small to refuse. Momentum follows naturally, and long-term goals become attainable through accumulation rather than sudden effort. Discipline becomes an automatic byproduct of a system built for success, one micro step at a time, repeated faithfully until it forms the foundation of a new, unstoppable habit structure. Number 7, train impulses through intentional deprivation. Discipline is born in the space between desire and restraint. Every time the mind acts on impulse without consideration, strength diminishes. Intentional deprivation is a method to train impulses, to exercise the will, and to fortify self-mastery. It is not a practice of punishment, but of growth, a conscious choice to limit immediate gratification in favor of long-term capability. By deliberately removing or delaying something that the body or mind craves, you build resilience, sharpen focus, and create the psychological muscle necessary to act decisively, even when temptation is present. Begin by identifying impulses that dominate behavior. These are patterns where immediate reward consistently overrides intention. It could be checking the phone, snacking without hunger, scrolling through social media, or giving in to emotional comfort in lieu of effort. Awareness of these impulses is crucial. By naming them, you create clarity about where energy is leaking and where self-discipline can be exercised. Intentional deprivation only works when it targets behaviors that naturally bypass conscious choice. Start with small, manageable deprivations. The goal is to condition the mind, not to provoke unnecessary suffering. For instance, if the habit is drinking coffee mid-morning as an automatic response, delay consumption by 30 minutes. If it is eating a snack at work, postpone it until hunger is genuine. These incremental challenges create controlled tension between desire and action, providing repeated opportunities for the will to assert itself. Each small victory strengthens self-control and builds confidence in the ability to act intentionally rather than reactively. Structure deprivation, deliberately, to maintain sustainability. Random denial often leads to frustration and abandonment, whereas thoughtful limitation produces growth. Set clear parameters. Define what is restricted, when and for how long. A fixed structure transforms temptation from chaos into an opportunity for exercise. For example, fasting from social media for 1 hour after waking, or skipping one daily indulgence, introduces friction in a controlled, measurable way. The mind learns to navigate resistance within defined boundaries. Physical impulses respond especially well to controlled deprivation. Cold exposure, brief hunger, or delayed gratification can train resilience on a tangible level. A cold shower in the morning strengthens the ability to endure discomfort. Eating slightly smaller portions or waiting before consuming a treat teaches the mind to differentiate true need from habitual craving. Each act of restraint builds a neural pattern that strengthens delayed response, making future resistance to impulse easier and more automatic. Mental impulses are equally trainable. Avoid immediately satisfying curiosity, comfort, or distraction. Delay checking notifications, postpone reactions to provocative stimuli, or resist the urge to multitask during periods of focus. Each moment of restraint reinforces cognitive control, sharpening attention and prioritization. The brain begins to value intention over automatic response, creating a foundation for sustained focus and rational decision-making. Pair deprivation with mindfulness to deepen effect. Awareness of the impulse as it arises, its physical sensations, emotional pull, and mental patterns, turns restraint into deliberate action rather than mechanical avoidance. Observe hunger, desire, or restlessness without immediately responding. This conscious engagement strengthens metacognition, teaching the brain to recognize impulses without surrendering to them. Over time, awareness itself becomes a tool of self-mastery, reducing the power of immediate gratification. Progressive difficulty accelerates adaptation. Once small deprivations are mastered, increase complexity, extend fasting periods, postpone larger indulgences, or restrict multiple impulses simultaneously. The mind and body adapt to increasing levels of controlled discomfort, reinforcing resilience, Gradual escalation ensures that deprivation strengthens capability without causing burnout, creating a scaffolded approach to impulse mastery. Integrate deprivation with practical goals. Resisting an impulse is not the objective in isolation. It is a means to greater focus, clarity, and achievement. For instance, delaying minor comforts during work sessions channels energy toward productivity. Skipping small distractions strengthens concentration and efficiency. Each act of restraint is a deliberate investment in the broader objective, reinforcing the connection between discipline and meaningful results. Use deliberate deprivation to counter habitual reactivity. Many impulses are unconscious. The body responds automatically without reflection. By restricting or delaying gratification, these automatic responses are disrupted. The mind begins to recognize that satisfaction is not immediate, allowing space for conscious choice. Habitual patterns loosen their grip, making intentional behavior easier to sustain. Controlled deprivation reshapes the balance between reactive and proactive action. Accountability magnifies effectiveness. Inform someone of your commitment to a period of restraint or track progress in a journal. Social awareness creates subtle pressure, enhancing the likelihood of adherence. Knowing that a record is kept or that someone else is aware of your choices adds weight to decisions, reinforcing the mental pathways that support self-control. Public or recorded evidence strengthens commitment beyond personal intention. Reflection is critical to consolidating gains. After periods of intentional deprivation, evaluate both emotional response and behavioral outcome. Observe how impulses were managed, what strategies succeeded, and where lapses occur. Reflection transforms experience into learning, enhancing insight into personal patterns. Understanding the triggers and successes reinforces the ability to implement restraint in future scenarios, making self-mastery both deliberate and teachable. Balance deprivation with replenishment. Purposeful restraint is not deprivation for its own sake, but a tool for growth. Ensure recovery periods to restore energy, motivation, and focus. Physical rest, nutritious meals, and mental downtime prevent overextension, maintaining the sustainability of the practice. Intentional cycles of restriction and replenishment optimize resilience, keeping growth aligned with health and well-being. Environmental design reinforces impulse training. Remove or reduce exposure to habitual temptations. Out of sight, out of mind amplifies the effect of deprivation. For instance, storing snacks out of reach, turning off notifications, or modifying habitual contexts reduces cognitive load, allowing willpower to function strategically rather than continuously resisting constant triggers. The environment supports, rather than competes with, intentional restraint. Intentional deprivation strengthens long-term self-discipline by conditioning the mind to prioritize strategic choices over immediate pleasure. Each act of restraint communicates to the brain that impulses are negotiable, not mandatory. The more frequently impulses are confronted with intentional delay, the more the brain adapts, creating automatic pathways for controlled response. Over time, decision-making becomes less reactive, more deliberate, and more aligned with long-term objectives. Micro-deprivation exercises accelerate adaptation. Short bursts of intentional restraint, such as fasting for a few hours, avoiding one digital habit, or resisting a minor indulgence, teach the brain to tolerate discomfort without overwhelming stress. These small, frequent exercises accumulate, training the mind to withstand progressively greater challenges with composure and focus. Repetition converts resistance into opportunity, establishing durable patterns of resilience. Psychological reward strengthens the habit. Recognize and reflect on successes, however small, to reinforce the value of restraint. Internal acknowledgement of controlled choice builds self-efficacy and confidence. Each victory, no matter how minor, solidifies the principle that impulses are tools to be managed, not masters to obey. Positive reinforcement ensures that deprivation remains motivating rather than punishing. Intentional deprivation also cultivates gratitude and perspective. Delaying or limiting habitual pleasures heightens awareness of abundance when indulgence is permitted. By appreciating the value of what is often taken for granted, desire becomes measured rather than compulsive. The mind develops discipline alongside clarity, learning not only to act intentionally, but to evaluate the worth of immediate gratification thoughtfully. Consistency is paramount. Periodic deprivation trains impulses, but habitual engagement embeds strength into identity. Make intentional restraint a regular component of daily practice, targeting different impulses systematically. Over time, the mind internalizes the principle that deliberate choice governs action, transforming self-control from a conscious effort into an instinctive, automatic response. Intentional deprivation is not a temporary exercise, but a lifelong strategy for self-mastery. It teaches endurance, strengthens willpower, and cultivates mental toughness. Each act of deliberate restraint compounds into greater autonomy, clarity, and capability. The mind learns to operate beyond fleeting impulses, creating space for deliberate actions, strategic focus, and disciplined living. Begin by selecting one habitual impulse to practice restraint over. Define clear parameters: when, how long, and under what conditions the impulse will be delayed or restricted. Commit to the exercise consistently, reflect on the outcomes, and gradually expand scope or intensity. Over time, impulses lose their automatic power, and self-discipline emerges not as a struggle but as a natural expression of control, resilience, and intentional living. Through the disciplined practice of intentional deprivation, the mind learns to navigate discomfort, delay gratification, and act purposefully despite internal urges. Each moment of restraint strengthens focus, builds mental endurance, and fosters the psychological capacity to face larger challenges with clarity and determination. Impulse becomes a tool, discipline becomes habitual, and personal growth becomes inevitable. Number 8. Replace urges with engineered alternatives. Every moment, impulses arise demanding immediate attention. They are powerful, automatic, and often misaligned with long-term objectives. Left unchecked, these urges dictate behavior, drain energy, and erode discipline. One of the most effective ways to master these impulses is not through brute force alone, but by replacing them with engineered alternatives. This approach acknowledges the natural drive for stimulation or relief and channels it into structured, intentional action. Instead of resisting a craving directly, which often amplifies its intensity, the mind is guided toward a pre-designed, productive substitute, transforming potential derailment into opportunity for growth. Begin by observing your impulses with careful attention. Identify patterns of automatic response, what triggers them, when they occur, and how they manifest. Some are physical, like reaching for food, caffeine, or comfort. Others are emotional, such as seeking distraction, avoidance, or validation. A precise understanding of the impulse allows the creation of an alternative that satisfies the underlying need without sabotaging goals. Awareness is the first step because unconscious impulses cannot be replaced effectively. They must first be understood. Next, design the alternatives thoughtfully. These replacements should fulfill the core satisfaction that the original impulse provides, but redirect energy toward constructive behavior. For example, if a craving for sugar strikes, engineered alternatives might include chewing gum, drinking water, or consuming a healthy snack that delivers similar sensory satisfaction. If the impulse is to scroll social media, alternatives could involve reading a book, journaling, or taking a short walk. The key is to preserve the reward in a controlled, purposeful manner. Timing is critical. Impulses often strike during predictable moments of fatigue, boredom, or stress. Anticipate these moments and have alternatives prearranged. By engineering substitutions in advance, the choice becomes almost automatic, reducing the need for willpower in the moment of temptation. Preparation transforms reactionary behavior into intentional action, strengthening consistency and reducing cognitive load. The alternative should be slightly challenging or engaging, not passive. Urges often arise because of the brain's need for stimulation, novelty, or reward. A substitute that is too easy or unengaging may fail to satisfy, while a well-designed activity captures attention, channels energy, and produces measurable outcomes. For instance, instead of mindlessly browsing social media, completing a 10-minute focused task provides accomplishment while redirecting attention away from the impulse. Layer alternatives with positive reinforcement. Every time the substitute is executed successfully, acknowledge the accomplishment. This could be a brief reflection, recording it in a journal, or rewarding oneself with a small, controlled pleasure. Positive reinforcement strengthens the neural pathways that associate redirection with satisfaction. Over time, the alternative becomes more compelling than the original impulse, reducing the likelihood of relapse. Micro-alternatives can be particularly effective. When impulses strike, the replacement action does not need to be extensive, just enough to shift focus and break automatic behavior. A single push-up, a 5-minute walk, or a brief breathing exercise can neutralize the craving. Once the initial momentum is established, the brain often continues with additional productive behavior. Small interventions accumulate into lasting habit change. Environmental engineering enhances the process. Design surroundings that make the alternative more accessible than the original impulse. Place healthy snacks at eye level and remove junk food from immediate reach. Keep a book or journal nearby instead of a phone. Arrange the workspace to favor productive engagement rather than distraction. The environment itself can cue the desired response, reducing reliance on fleeting willpower and increasing the likelihood of automatic compliance. Anticipate resistance and preempt it. Some impulses are deeply ingrained and require persistent redirection. Multiple engineered alternatives may be necessary for different contexts or intensities. Rotate options to maintain novelty and engagement. The brain adapts quickly to repetition. If the substitute becomes predictable and unchallenging, the urge may resurface. Variety keeps the mind engaged and prevents the impulse from regaining dominance. Combine emotional awareness with action. Many urges arise from unprocessed emotions or stress. Engineered alternatives should account for both physical and emotional needs. For example, the impulse to eat emotionally could be replaced with journaling feelings, taking a walk, or practicing deep breathing. Addressing the emotional component prevents substitution from becoming superficial and ensures that underlying triggers are acknowledged and resolved. Integrate alternatives with existing routines. Embedding substitutes into habitual patterns ensures regularity and reduces friction. For instance, after a morning coffee, if an impulse to check the phone arises, automatically redirect to reviewing a priority list or completing a small task. Routine creates predictability, allowing the brain to respond automatically to the structured alternative rather than defaulting to the original impulse. Accountability magnifies effectiveness. Share alternative strategies with a peer, coach, or group who can provide reinforcement and feedback. Public commitment or tracking increases adherence, as the social component creates subtle pressure to follow through. Knowing that someone else is aware of your redirection strategy strengthens engagement and provides additional motivation in moments of temptation. Visualization strengthens impulse management. Mentally rehearsing the moment of temptation and successfully implementing the alternative primes both focus and confidence. Picture the urge arising, recognize it, and consciously choose the engineered action. Mental rehearsal reduces hesitation and builds automaticity, allowing real-world application to feel natural rather than forced. Track progress to observe patterns and reinforce gains, documenting instances where impulses were successfully replaced provides tangible evidence of mastery. Visual records of repeated success reinforce identity as someone capable of intentional action. The cumulative effect of these micro-wins strengthens confidence and reduces the perceived power of the original impulse over time. Long-term benefit emerges as the brain rewires itself. Repeated use of engineered alternatives strengthens the neural pathways for intentional choice while weakening automatic response to impulses. The original craving gradually loses dominance because the substitute becomes more compelling, consistent, and aligned with broader goals. Discipline shifts from external struggle to internalized automaticity. Micro-challenges within alternatives can deepen effectiveness. For example, if an impulse arises to procrastinate, the engineered substitute could involve completing a task faster or with greater precision than usual. This slight challenge engages cognitive and emotional resources, reinforcing satisfaction and increasing the likelihood of repetition. The mind begins to associate overcoming impulses with growth and mastery. Avoid perfectionism. The goal is redirection, not flawless execution. Occasional lapses are inevitable, but each instance provides data for refinement. Adjust alternatives, timing, and environmental cues as needed. Learning from missteps ensures the system evolves, becoming more resilient and adaptive over time. Combining multiple strategies strengthens impact. Micro-alternatives, environmental design, accountability, and emotional awareness can operate together to form a comprehensive framework for impulse mastery. The integration ensures that impulses are consistently addressed from multiple angles, increasing the likelihood of success and reducing reliance on sheer willpower. Replace urges with engineered alternatives to convert potential derailment into growth. Each impulse becomes a signal for structured action, an opportunity to practice self-mastery, and a chance to reinforce discipline. Over time, the mind learns to anticipate, recognize, and redirect cravings automatically, producing consistency, focus, and enhanced productivity. Begin by identifying a single habitual impulse. Create at least one engineered alternative that is accessible, rewarding, and aligned with long-term goals. Implement it consistently, track results, and reflect on effectiveness. Expand the system gradually to cover additional impulses. Through repeated application, impulses lose control, deliberate action strengthens, and discipline becomes a natural expression of intention. Replacing urges with engineered alternatives is not deprivation or restriction, it is empowerment. It teaches the mind to act with purpose, transforms automatic reactions into intentional behavior, and allows energy to flow toward meaningful outcomes. Each impulse, once a threat to progress, becomes a tool for reinforcement, growth, and the cultivation of a disciplined, resilient self. Number 9. Automate discipline through environmental design. Discipline is often viewed as a battle of willpower, a daily struggle fought against fatigue, distraction, and temptation. While sheer force of will can produce results temporarily, it is inherently limited, exhausting, and inconsistent. The smarter approach is to shift the burden from fluctuating motivation onto the environment itself. Environmental design transforms surroundings into silent allies that guide behavior, reduce friction, and make disciplined action nearly automatic. By carefully structuring the physical, digital, and social context, discipline ceases to be a constant fight. It becomes the default mode of living. Begin by analyzing the spaces in which decisions occur. Most lapses in discipline happen where choice is unstructured or where cues for distraction dominate. Examine the home, office, digital devices, and daily routines for elements that prompt inaction, procrastination, or indulgence. Identify objects, habits, or notifications that consistently derail focus. The key is to understand that the environment is not neutral. It actively shapes behavior. Awareness of triggers and friction points is the first step in designing a system that encourages consistency. Remove friction from desired actions. If a task is difficult to start because tools, information, or resources are scattered, structure the environment to reduce these obstacles. Keep workout equipment in a visible and accessible location. Prepare meals in advance for healthy eating, or organize workspace materials for immediate use. When initiating productive action requires minimal effort, starting becomes natural, momentum builds quickly, and reliance on sheer willpower diminishes. Conversely, add friction to undesirable behaviors. Place obstacles between yourself and distractions. Hide devices, block apps, or remove temptations from immediate reach. For instance, storing unhealthy snacks in an inconvenient location or turning off notifications increases the cost of indulgence while reducing unconscious lapses. By making negative choices inconvenient and positive choices easy, the environment itself nudges behavior in the desired direction without conscious struggle. Digital environments are particularly influential. Social media, endless streaming content, and constant notifications are engineered to hijack attention. Use tools, settings, and scheduling to restrict these inputs. Block websites during focus periods, mute notifications, and set boundaries for device usage. Automating digital discipline prevents mental fragmentation and reduces the cognitive load required to resist temptation, creating a stable space for productive action. Routine is a powerful form of environmental design. By embedding actions into a consistent sequence, behavior becomes automatic. Morning routines that include exercise, journaling, and planning create cues for success at the start of the day. The repetition of context, time, and sequence allows the brain to anticipate actions without deliberation, transforming effortful initiation into automatic engagement. Predictable structure reduces resistance and ensures discipline is maintained consistently. Visual cues reinforce habit formation. Placing reminders, notes, or visual markers in strategic locations prompts action at the right moment. Seeing a book on the desk triggers reading, a filled water bottle encourages hydration, or a calendar with checked boxes motivates continued streaks. Visual design converts abstract goals into tangible signals that guide behavior, making adherence intuitive rather than forced. Social environment is equally impactful. Surround yourself with people who model discipline, focus, and accountability. Collaborative habits, shared routines, or visible accountability systems reinforce the behaviors you wish to cultivate. Conversely, minimize exposure to individuals whose habits encourage distraction, indulgence, or procrastination. The social sphere amplifies the principles of environmental design, creating reinforcement loops that support rather than hinder progress. Incorporate tools and technology to automate decisions wherever possible. Timers, reminders, task management apps, and smart devices can guide behavior without requiring continuous attention or motivation. Scheduling focus periods, automated alarms for exercise or hydration, and preset work blocks reduce the need for conscious decision-making. The environment actively supports discipline, allowing energy to be directed toward execution rather than negotiation. Design physical spaces to align with goals. Declutter workspaces to minimize visual distractions. Designate areas specifically for focused work, and separate spaces for rest and recreation. Environmental separation reinforces the intended use of each space, reducing cognitive conflict and helping the brain associate location with action. The design of surroundings subtly encourages automatic compliance with desired behaviors. Prepare in advance to prevent lapses. Meals, workouts, work materials, and daily plans should be organized so that the environment preconditions success. When preparation occurs ahead of time, resistance during execution is minimized. A ready-to-use setup allows action to flow naturally, leaving less room for hesitation or compromise. Automation through environmental design is most effective when the groundwork is complete. Habits can be stacked for exponential effect. Pair a well-established behavior with a new one to leverage momentum. For example, after morning coffee, read one page of a book. After brushing teeth, review a task list. Anchoring new habits to established routines leverages environmental cues to make adoption effortless. The surrounding sequences and triggers align to support disciplined growth. Track and reinforce progress visually. Habit trackers, charts, or logs provide immediate feedback and reinforce adherence. The visual representation of consistency motivates continued effort and makes success tangible. Environmental design includes not only the physical arrangement of objects, but also the ongoing reflection and reinforcement of progress within that space. Environmental design can also condition emotional states. Lighting, music, and ambient conditions influence mood, energy, and focus. Bright, organized spaces enhance alertness and motivation. Natural light, airflow, and calming background sounds reduce stress and facilitate sustained engagement. Emotional regulation becomes part of the design, reducing internal friction and supporting disciplined action. Automate accountability wherever possible. Scheduled check-ins, recurring reporting, or shared visibility of progress create an environment in which discipline is expected, noticed, and reinforced. External mechanisms reduce reliance on internal willpower and create a system that subtly compels follow-through. The environment becomes both scaffold and monitor, supporting consistent action. Use the principle of proximity strategically. Keep desired actions close and easily accessible, while distancing distractions. Accessibility increases engagement with productive behavior, and inaccessibility decreases the likelihood of succumbing to impulses. The arrangement of space creates automatic nudges that guide daily decisions toward consistency. Environmental design supports long-term identity formation. When surroundings consistently cue productive behavior, the brain internalizes these actions as part of self-concept. Discipline ceases to be an external struggle and becomes part of habitual identity. The spaces you inhabit, the routines you reinforce, and the cues you embed collectively shape who you are and what you naturally do. Flexibility within structure ensures sustainability. Environments should support goals but allow adaptation as circumstances change. Temporary adjustments, relocations, or variations can maintain alignment with objectives without breaking consistency. The core principle remains: the environment should actively reduce friction for desired behaviors and increase friction for undesired ones. Begin with small changes that produce immediate impact. Remove one source of distraction, arrange a workspace for a specific purpose, or set a simple automated reminder. Observe how these modifications influence behavior and gradually expand the scope. Each intentional change compounds, strengthening habitual compliance and reducing reliance on effortful decision-making. Automating discipline through environmental design is the ultimate leverage for sustained success. It externalizes effort, reduces cognitive load, and aligns daily action with long-term goals. The surroundings, cues, routines, and tools collectively form a system in which productive behavior is not just possible, but default. Over time, this system shapes identity, reinforces habits, and converts intentional action into effortless consistency. Discipline becomes natural when the environment is intentionally structured. Momentum is maintained without constant reliance on fluctuating motivation, and decisions that once required effort occur almost automatically. By designing surroundings to reinforce goals, eliminate friction, and cue productive behavior, individuals cultivate resilience, focus, and consistency. The environment becomes a silent partner in success, ensuring that each day, each action, and each decision aligns with purpose and progress. Begin today by evaluating one aspect of your environment that undermines discipline. Modify it deliberately to favor productive behavior, reinforce the habit, or remove distractions. Over weeks, layer additional adjustments. With each iteration, discipline becomes less a personal struggle and more an automatic response, guided by an environment designed to make success the default state. The physical, social, and digital spaces you inhabit will then actively support growth, focus, and consistent achievement. Number 10. Anchor goals to non-negotiable habits. Goals are powerful motivators, but without consistent action, they remain abstract aspirations. Progress requires embedding intention into the fabric of daily life, transforming fleeting motivation into unwavering habit. Anchoring goals to non-negotiable habits is the strategy that converts ambition into tangible results. By tying objectives to actions that are performed without exception, regardless of circumstance, you create a foundation of reliability and momentum. The key is consistency. Non-negotiable habits are executed every day, or at a minimum in every cycle of action, making them impervious to mood, energy, or distraction. Start by clarifying the ultimate objectives. Define what success looks like in specific measurable terms. A goal without clarity is easily postponed or distorted by competing priorities. Once the target is defined, identify the daily or frequent behaviors that directly contribute to achieving it. These are the actions that, when performed consistently, move the needle toward the desired outcome. Every major achievement is the accumulation of small, repeated steps. Identifying these steps is the first step in anchoring them as non-negotiable habits. Non-negotiable habits are distinct because they are insulated from negotiation. External pressures, emotional fluctuations, or convenience do not alter their execution. For example, a writer might commit to writing 500 words every day, regardless of energy level or distractions. An athlete might commit to a brief morning training session, even on travel days. The power of these habits lies in their immunity to rationalization. They are obligations of self-discipline, not suggestions or optional practices. Consistency reinforces identity. Each time a non-negotiable habit is executed, it sends a signal to the subconscious mind, "This is who I am." Over time, the repeated performance of these anchored actions transforms self-perception. You are no longer someone who tries or intends to achieve. You are someone who acts reliably, predictably, and in alignment with goals. Anchored habits gradually shift identity from aspiration to embodiment, creating resilience against lapses or external pressures. Begin small, focusing on the minimum effective action. Non-negotiable habits are sustainable because they are achievable, not extreme. Even a brief, focused action performed daily establishes the pattern of consistency. A single push-up, 5 minutes of focused study, or writing one paragraph each morning forms the backbone of long-term habit reinforcement. Over time, the cumulative effect multiplies, producing significant progress with minimal initial friction. Tie habits directly to the desired outcome. Each habit should have a clear causal link to the overarching goal. For example, reading 10 pages daily supports intellectual growth, planning each morning enhances productivity, and consistent savings contribute to financial independence. When the connection between habit and goal is obvious, compliance is easier to maintain. The habit is no longer arbitrary. It is a direct, measurable step toward a meaningful objective. Anchor habits to existing routines to reduce friction and increase adherence. Habit stacking, attaching a new non-negotiable behavior to an established daily action, creates automaticity. For instance, meditating immediately after brushing teeth, reviewing tasks after morning coffee, or stretching after waking anchors the habit to an existing cue. The brain responds to predictable sequences, and integrating new habits into familiar patterns strengthens consistency while reducing mental effort. Track execution to reinforce commitment. Visual tracking, calendars, or digital reminders provide tangible feedback on adherence. Seeing the accumulation of completed non-negotiable habits generates motivation and accountability. Tracking also highlights gaps or inconsistencies, allowing for course correction before habits lose their momentum. Tangible feedback transforms abstract consistency into visible evidence of progress, reinforcing both habit and goals simultaneously. Anchor habits to consequences and accountability mechanisms. Non-negotiable actions gain strength when failure triggers predictable repercussions, whether internal or external. Missing a habit might require a compensatory action, like an extra training session, or public accountability with a peer or coach. The presence of consequence strengthens adherence, converting voluntary action into a structural requirement. Over time, the habit becomes self-reinforcing as the consequences become psychologically unnecessary. The action persists because it is intrinsic to routine and identity. Design your environment to support anchored habits. Physical spaces, tools, and visual cues should reinforce the behavior, making execution simple and intuitive. A dedicated workspace, visible fitness equipment, or pre-prepared materials reduces friction and removes excuses. Environmental design acts as a silent partner, nudging behavior toward consistency without conscious deliberation. The combination of habit anchoring and supportive surroundings multiplies the likelihood of unbroken adherence. Embrace the compounding effect. One day of consistent action may seem trivial, but repeated without exception, small steps accumulate exponentially. Non-negotiable habits create a base upon which incremental improvements stack. The disciplined performance of minor actions compounds into major achievements. Success becomes a natural consequence of repeated, reliable behavior, rather than a product of sporadic effort or extraordinary motivation. Mental framing is essential. Non-negotiable habits are executed not as burdens, but as commitments to self-mastery. The focus shifts from choice to inevitability. These are actions performed because they are integral to identity, not because energy or desire permits. This mindset removes negotiation from the equation, transforming daily behavior into a seamless extension of long-term purpose. Leverage emotional momentum. Consistently executing non-negotiable habits generates confidence, reduces anxiety about progress, and creates a sense of control over life's trajectory. Each completed habit reinforces belief in capability, making subsequent challenges more approachable. Discipline is cultivated not as a singular act of will, but as a habitual pattern embedded into the rhythm of daily living. Iterate and refine. Habits can evolve alongside goals. Adjust intensity, duration, or focus while maintaining non-negotiable status. Flexibility within structure ensures sustainability and prevents stagnation. Anchoring is not about rigidity for its own sake. It is about embedding essential actions into life consistently while remaining responsive to growth, circumstance, and changing objectives. Link habits to reward systems selectively. Immediate satisfaction can reinforce persistence in early stages, while delayed gratification reinforces the long-term payoff. For example, completing a morning routine may be followed by a brief reflective pause or journaling, reinforcing the psychological satisfaction of adherence. Rewards strengthen neural pathways that support continued execution, particularly during the establishment phase. Anchor multiple habits around one central goal. By stacking complementary behaviors, the impact on the objective multiplies. For instance, healthy eating, regular exercise, and consistent sleep collectively enhance physical performance. Studying, note-taking, and reflection collectively enhance skill mastery. Anchored habits create a network effect, producing disproportionate results relative to individual effort. Visualizing the connection between habit and goal strengthens adherence. Regularly remind yourself of why each non-negotiable action matters. The awareness that each daily habit contributes directly to long-term objectives reinforces commitment and reduces the appeal of short-term distractions. Habit becomes a conduit for purpose rather than an isolated action. Non-negotiable habits also build resilience against unforeseen disruptions. When life circumstances change, habits performed without exception provide a stable foundation. Even in chaos, the anchor acts as a reference point, maintaining progress toward goals despite external volatility. Consistency becomes the constant upon which adaptation and growth are built. Begin with one critical habit. Execute it daily without exception, regardless of mood, energy, or circumstance. Observe the psychological, emotional, and practical impact. Once mastery is achieved, anchor additional habits incrementally. Over time, a network of non-negotiable behaviors accumulates, each reinforcing the others and collectively driving sustained progress toward meaningful goals. Anchoring goals to non-negotiable habits transforms intention into action. It converts abstract aspiration into measurable, repeatable behaviors. Discipline becomes automated, success becomes inevitable, and long-term growth is secured through the power of consistency. Every goal is reinforced daily by actions that are performed because they are non-negotiable, creating an unstoppable rhythm of productivity, focus, and achievement. Through consistent adherence, non-negotiable habits evolve from tasks into identity markers. You no longer need to negotiate whether or not to act. Performing the habits is simply who you are. Each day, action accumulates, progress becomes visible, and discipline becomes effortless. Anchored habits ensure that goals are not merely wished for. They are lived, embodied, and realized through daily unwavering commitment.